in the late 70s, 1970s, early 1980s. I always have to designate the century because people think I'm very, very old. Anyway, I met such an interesting character that is worth all of you checking out. His name is Fernando Flores. And Fernando Flores was Minister of Finance in the IND government. And those of you who know, are you having a baby?
I am.
Oh, when?
August.
Oh, is it your first one?
Yes.
Oh, that is so great.
Thank you.
Oh, being a parent is the greatest thing. So he was in the government of Allende, and as you might know, that the U.S. government, in its infinite wisdom, decided that Allende wasn't good. So he got overthrown, and Fernando came to this, was a political prisoner for 3 years, and had horrible things happen to him. Amnesty International got him out. He went to Berkeley, out in California, and started studying philosophy. Should I look at the camera or should I look at them? What is good here?
Look at us. Oh, we're that.
That's the Ashoka Series, I think. That's our motto. I can do whatever you want me to do.
As you feel comfortable, try to do both if possible.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what Fernando did was he studied difficult continental philosophy. Continental philosophy is a branch of philosophy happening in the continent of Europe that had more to do with existentialism and the meaning of life. That's different than analytical philosophy that has to do with more problems of logic and truth claims, all that. And what he discovered in there was something gigantically obvious, but heretofore missed about management and leadership, which was it's all conversations. So if you look at what leaders are doing, they are talking some of the time, and if they're really good leaders, they're mostly listening. Because, of course, when we listen, we find out things, but the way we listen to people lets them be brilliant or not. So you could check this out today if you wanted. So notice how the way you listen to people changes how they talk to you. And the more settled we are, the more open we are, the more willing to be influenced we are by the person that is speaking to us, the more they will open. We probably all have examples that immediately come to mind of people that when we're with them, we just open. And other people, we are more guarded. So Fernando did incredible work with conversations that build relationships, conversations that explore possibilities, conversations that coordinate action, and has really rigorous structures for all those. Rigorous meaning they hold up. They're just not somebody made it up on the way to the workshop one day, which is how some workshops are. As you know, you've gone to some of those workshops and you start to wonder, is there any substance? I'm friends with Fernando. So I'll tell you the real way I got to be friends with Fernando. So I worked with people's bodies in those days. Some of you might know this way of work, a term called Rolfing. If you don't know Rolfing, you can look it up. It's R-O-L-F-I-N-G. It's named after Ida Rolf. Anyway, he came to my practice, and I was Rolfing him, straightening his body out, because as you can imagine, having gone through the terrible things that he went through, he had so much trauma and so much tightness and so much holding in his body. So the Rolfing helped release a lot of that. Anyway, Fernando, he's still alive. He lives in Berkeley still, and he's not a modest person. So I'm Rolfing him, and at one point he asks me, so James, I can't do it in this beautiful, beautiful accent that he has. James, something like that. Anyway, what do you do all day besides Rolfing? And I said, I read books. And he says, I'm the best person you'll ever meet for books to read. Uh-huh. Like what? So then he starts giving me these books to read, like Being in Time by Martin Heidegger. So Being in Time by Martin Heidegger is this 700-page book that when you pick it up, it supposedly has been translated from the German, but it's hard to tell when you're reading it that it's translated. It's really dense and difficult. And Heidegger is a really important thinker. He changed a lot of the ways that we understand human beings. He's really the underpinning of the people that we think of as existentialists, like Camus and Sartre, are versions of Heidegger. Anyway, so Fernando talks to me about these books. I read these books and he guides me through it. Then I come up with an arrangement where he would teach me what he knew and I worked free for him a day per week. So I got to know his family and his 3 daughters, and I got a philosophical education that was really intense. It wasn't a philosophical education about abstract topic somewhere. It was about my life, because Fernando is this incredible observer. So he observes and observes, and then when he says something, he has mounds of grounding and evidence for it. So whenever he would make a philosophical point, it would be writ in the the flesh and blood of my life. So that what a chance to meet. And this maybe has happened to you in your life. You meet a real teacher, not somebody who's just passing along something that they heard, but somebody who is what they're talking about. And that's when we can be changed. Anyway, so Fernando was talking about coaching. Kind of sort of like the way we talk about coaching these days, not coaching as somebody who's on a sports team. When I started being a professional coach, when I would sit next to someone in an airplane and every now and then can't avoid talking to them. Some of you might love sitting next to the plane and talking for 12 hours next to kids. And others of us are not that way. Anyway, people would ask me, what do you do? And I said, I'm a coach. And they'd say, what sport? No, that doesn't happen. So Fernando started this journey for me of coaching, of having a relationship with somebody who's dedicated to our being both excellent at what we're setting out to do and fulfilled in what we're doing, both. And he had this wonderful, strong band of way of working with people, which was linguistic. So in 1987, after a few twists and turns, my wife, Stacy, and I started New Ventures West, and since then we've included more and more and more and more things in coaching. We call it integral coaching so that we can pour anything we want into it. We don't call it linguistic coaching because that might leave some things out, or we don't call it management coaching because it might leave things out. So we include. So there's a baby, a little kid around. Anyway, so is that what you want me to talk about? That?
Yeah, that's lovely. I mean, coaching, how it is helping us in enhancing our quality of listening and noticing also our surroundings. And it seems to me what I hear is in enabling us to excel and have or be fulfilled in the way that we live and we live life and we do things.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about, like, if we want to have in our day-to-day some sort of centeredness and we just want to be, aware, we just want to have a good day. What's a hack to do that? How do we do that individually and with our teams?
I just have so many hacks to share. I just collect them.
Under 1 minute.
So part one of listening is you have to be present in order to listen. Most of us aren't present most of the time. We have other things on our mind taking us away. biggest and most extensive and immediate way to get present is to pay attention to your body. So anytime you want to be present, you just have to feel your feet. That'll do it. Not think about your feet, feel your feet. We all know about breathing. I think children stop each other on the playground and say, take a breath. Everyone knows that our breathing is connected into our nervous system, and when our breathing deepens and regulates, our whole system calms. But here's two of my favorites that I just learned recently. One is sighing. So in the elevator, going up to an important meeting, you can just 3 sighs. Life will be fine. Really. Humming. You find yourself in one of those meetings. Not that Ashoka has those kind of meetings, but those kind of meetings where you wonder, why am I alive? Why are they telling me this? Am I supposed to do something with this? You can hum quietly to yourself. It'll be really bad the next meeting all of you are in. I've got the humming. Speaker will be wondering what's going on here. Anyway, that'll do it. If you do something rhythmic on both sides of your body, it will balance your brain, which will center you. So there's a couple ways of doing that. One is with your hands. Find a rhythm. Yes, you could do it. Some people, it works on top of their knees. Some people work on the side of their knees. You can do this under the table. People won't notice. You can also do it with your feet. So those are some ones that will work immediately. They're centered. But we have to want to be centered. Part of the reason we're not centered is we are trying to escape what's going on right now. You may have noticed that from time to time. You wish you were somewhere else. We have this strange idea because we have this wonderful gift and this wonderful curse of the human imagination. So thank goodness there's imagination, because you all are imagining a world that could be, and how we could be treating each other, and how we could be treating our planet, and how we could be treating all the living systems that are here. How wonderful. And the other part that's difficult about our imagination is we're sitting here and we can imagine, I could be down across the street having a really good coffee and playing that whatever game, or looking at cribs for my baby, or whatever. So yes, these physical things can help us, but it has to start with our intention to be present. I'm also a Zen student, so one of the things my Zen teacher said 25 years ago is, you're alive, you're having the life, you might as well be here for it. So do you ever wonder what you're waiting for? Like, I'll show up when, I don't know what. It's really interesting, or they're really praising me, or they're really cute. I'll show up then. But other than that, I'll sort of fade in and out. So this is key to being fulfilled. We can't have a fulfilled life if we're not present. And we also can't coach if we're not present, because human beings are huge experts about when people are being present and when they're not. You can tell in a flash. And sometimes it's so disappointing where we're finally getting our performance review and we're interested. It happens. People go in and they want to get the feedback. I don't know how you do it here, but and then you go in there and your supervisor is not that. Anyway, they're not there. We can tell immediately. If you're a professional HR person, of course, you know how to look present. You know, you get that present look on your face. But we can tell. And that's where coaching starts, is there. So I'll tell you one of my secrets about coaching. This is how I always start coaching. So you say that, and then you drink a cup of tea and make them wait. So it starts with, of course, being present, but then it starts with feeling your heart. So your heart, of course, is this organ that pumps blood, yes. It's also in Chinese medicine, Chinese cosmology, which is the same thing. It's the organ that unifies everything. So our heart is the part of us that integrates all the different aspects of our life. And our heart is where we feel warm connection, of course, to ourselves and to other people. So the next time you have a chance to coach someone, do your best to get present in a method that works for you. Besides the ones I just said, here's two more. You can remember a place. For some of us, remembering a place really helps, like a place where you really feel relaxed and at home. So maybe it's a beautiful place in nature, or maybe it's your home, who knows, with your cat on your lap. Who knows what it is for you. The other one is to have a slogan. I heard a great one this week of this woman. Whenever she's starting to feel pressed upon by life or overwhelmed by a situation, she says to herself, "Nothing to defend." And she arrives, her body relaxes. So the body ones can work, and they are the ones that are most effective for most people, but also imagery works or a slogan works. So do something to get present, and then occupy your heart for a moment with your awareness. Among other things, that will bring our awareness down deeper. And then feel from your heart into their heart. And then it really, after that, yes, we have to say things that are somewhat intelligent. These are smart people, you know, we have to say intelligent things. But the real work has been done. Why? Because when we are in our heart, when we are centered ourselves, it invites the person we're talking to back to themselves. And when we're back to ourselves, we're in touch with all our gorgeous resources, all the things we've lived through, all the things we've learned, all the commitments that people have here. I'm sure you remember this like 20 times per day, that you're working with people who actually care. I know that's as its upside and its downside. I'm aware. But it's so much better than working at a place where people don't care, where people are just going through the motions, where nothing really seems to be at stake. So you get to live in this blessed environment all the time with people who are living from what they care about. So if you can be present, like with this guy here, it's so easy to be present with you. So just be present and say, it takes him like 0.3 of a second to be in his heart. And this, I don't even know this man's name, but as soon as he's in his heart, you see what happens for him? You see how substantial he gets, how settled he gets more confident, all of that. So that's where coaching can start. I don't even know what was I answering this.
This is fabulous. I would love to hear if there are questions from everyone in the world and here.
So,
and please speak up because the microphone is on this side.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Should I just?
Okay. Yeah. We're doing. You can probably say who you are.
Okay. So I'm Tim.
Hi, Tim.
I work here in the States, and I I love sort of the idea of being present and everything you're describing. And I'm contemplating the difference between coaching and therapy. And because the stereotype of a therapist is that they sit back and they just let the person sort of who is going through therapy to fill the space and to do most of the talking and then ask a variety of questions, presumably not revealing much about themselves. And so, and I'm trying to juxtapose that with sort of a situation where there's give and take, and where sort of you, just as you are today, revealing a bit about your past so that we have a sense of where you're coming from and maybe we can map some of those lessons onto our own lives. How do coaches sort of strike that balance? How much do you participate actively and reveal stuff about yourself in order to create that rapport?
Yeah. So it's done. Thanks, first of all, thanks for your question and for breaking the ice here. I always think we should call on people in the back. Don't you think we should always do that? Anyway, that's just my being wicked, I suppose. So, yes, we reveal enough so the person can feel comfortable. We are gigantic, as I will keep saying, we are such social beings. And a big part of our brain all the time is checking out social safety. And some people, because of their gender or their ethnic background or their racial background or something else, never feel safe. I don't need to say that to this group, but sometimes we forget. So enough so the person can start to feel safe. But that's all, because otherwise it'll start to be about me. Especially if you, at a place like this where the person you're talking to is going to be so interested in finding out about you. And they'll ask you 15 questions in a row. Oh, Joe, what was Frando like? And where in Berkeley did you live? And what classes? So just enough so that we can have some rapport, have some connection. But coaches are different than what you describe therapists as being, because we do say things. So our kind of coaching makes statements. Some kind of coaching that you may have heard about or maybe you've been trained in only asks questions. When I've studied the transcripts of these questions, they turn out to pretty quickly be statements disguised as questions, like, don't you think it would be a good idea to talk to them? That is not a question. That's a statement of, if you have any sense, you will do that. So we do make statements. Why? Because it turns out we have blind spots. Now I know we individually don't have blind spots. Other people have blind spots, and that's why we're here to point them out. It could have happened that you have your own blind spots that other people can see. And that's where coaching can be so helpful. We don't notice it all. Is that addressing what you wanted?
Yeah, no, that's really helpful.
We have a question from online.
Sure.
Bart in Belgium. Yes, we have a question from Bart in Belgium.
We're going to do this in Flemish then.
Oh, that will be difficult for me. If anyone else can help. So the question Bart has is, what can you advise us to avoid that our personal complexities interfere with our coaching? So I guess, what can you advise us to avoid so that our personal complexities, I think, do not interfere with our coaching?
Our personal complexities, our complexes maybe? I could make the question into what I want it to be.
Or you can speak up, Bart, if you want to.
Yeah, please, Bart, feel free to unmute yourself.
This is Washington, D.C., where
can't do
you
it
answer
from
the
my
question that you want.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, what I meant really is what you said earlier with our blind spots. So basically those things that we are not aware of,
Right.
and which often carry the history of our past trauma and,
Right.
and translating complexities. So not necessarily complexes, but really like our unconscious side. How do we avoid interfering that?
So the first start, the place to start with Bart's question is knowing that in order to be a coach, we have to do substantial work on ourselves. So some people think, oh, I'm an expert at finance, so I'll just put finance coach on my card and now I can coach people in finance. But I haven't done the work that Bart is pointing to. I haven't done enough work to reveal my own prejudices. We're always going to have prejudice, but we can find out a lot of them. My automaticity, my habits, what I pay attention to, what I ignore, the automatic ways I get triggered. Triggered as in some kind of fight or flight is going on in my nervous system. Knowing all that, that's part one. Part two is having practices where we attend to our state, the state of our presence, the state of our being, the state of our body.
Can you give an example?
Sure, of a practice that does that.
How do you how do you attend to yourself with a practice?
So what did I do before I got here this morning? So the first thing I did was I did Zazen. Just makes it, so Zazen is paying attention to the body, paying attention to awareness itself. And from that kind of practice, I start to learn the way my individual mind works. What are the patterns of thoughts that are here for me in the background all the time? Then I did some Qigong Chinese energy work, because I know that when the energy is moving through my body, I get less fixated on what someone brings me, says to me. So we have to attend to both our mind, how our mind works, so that our mind is fluid, and the same thing with our body. Is this too, is that too odd an answer? So I'm sure everybody in this room knows that your body and your mind are connected. Some people say,
we forget at times.
yes, some people say, no, it's not in my body, it's in my brain. So I wonder where they think their brain is. Turns out, in every case, human brains are in human bodies. If they're outside of a human body, they're not alive anymore. So our body and mind are in a relationship affecting each other all the time. So sometimes you might think what the person is saying to you is so annoying. Actually, what they're saying isn't annoying. It's that you have this tension in your back because you had a long drive in this morning and you have a car that you have to sort of crunch yourself into. And so you're having this background sensation from your body that's putting you in a mood, and then we think it's the person. So we have to do all that kind of understanding of how our individual body-mind works. And the other part is, some people think that coaching means having, do you have something?
I don't know, I'm just smiling, Stuart.
Oh, okay. Sometimes people think that good coaching means I have all my attention on the other person. No. So as a beginner, you can start with 50% of your attention on the other person and 50% on you. And then as you do more coaching, it goes the way that you don't expect, maybe, which is you go towards 70% of the attention on you and 30% on the other person. Because all the information that you'll get about the person to whom you're speaking will be in your body mind here. And if you're paying attention over there, you miss it. You could also check this out. Where for you is somebody else? So we can, I could say, you're there, You're over there. But of course you're not. You're over here. For me, you're over here in my nervous system. So, yes, I know. So that's why it's important to pay attention here to the effects of the interaction, not over there. How are you guys doing with all this? Is anybody lost in any of this? I know he has a question, but I want to see how people are here are doing. Everybody's all right? Okay.
And also in the online, is everyone all right? Like, if there's anything to be said, please say it.
Yeah, we're good. I have a question, Lizette. This is Stefan, but did you want us to ask questions online or just post them?
Go ahead, just share it.
All right, then I'll jump in. James, thanks for being with us. So I posted a question. I'll just ask you directly. In both my role as being managed and being coached, as well as a manager, one struggle I have is I'm trying to figure out when I'm a manager, we call it accountability partner at Ashoka. I sometimes struggle to tease out when I should be in a coaching mode, when I should be in an accountability mode, or in other modes. And I'd just love to hear your thoughts on the distinction between the role of a coach and the role of a manager. Should a manager try to be a coach, and how do they draw distinctions when they're coaching versus other roles they may have to play as manager?
What's the trouble you're having with it? What trips you up?
Well, the sort of central tension that I struggle with is I sort of want to be a coach as much as possible. And yet I also feel an obligation to hold accountability and sort of say, look, we have an accountability to our stakeholders or to these objectives. And that moment of talking about accountability doesn't always seem coach-like to me in the way that I worked with an external coach where there was no accountability at all. It was just me trying to figure out questions and challenges and the coach helping me think that through. So the distinction here is, I feel that a manager sometimes needs to bring accountability into the conversation in a way that a pure coaching role might not.
Yeah. So I'm seeing that tension that some people feel, that people want to have the coaching be this safe place where the person can do whatever. And then we're a manager, and we said we would be accountable for these outcomes happening. So how does that all work together? I think it's a strange notion. So I know I'm about to challenge something that you guys do here with no background about why you do it. That doesn't stop me. So the accountability partner means like I'm holding the accountability and you're not. So I don't think it goes like that. I think coaching's about reminding people what their commitments are and working with them so that they're more competent to fulfill on what they said they would do, more than to get them to be accountable. You see, getting them to be accountable starts with they don't want to, and I have to get them to. Somebody who I understand we all have our own preferences, and some things we avoid, and we have procrastination, and we have all our habits. Yes, but if somebody isn't committed, that's the place to start. Committed to whatever sort of outcomes you all are after. And then the coach is somebody who's there to support, as I already said, the person becoming more competent to fulfill that, all the different kind of competencies it takes. So it takes competency sometimes in working with myself. So I might be committed to do something, but I am inadequate in terms of working with my own habits. Sometimes we accuse people of being not committed, but actually they're committed. They just don't know what to do when they don't feel like doing something. Have any of you ever been in an exercise program, and especially at the beginning of the year, it's worn off by now, but at the beginning of the year, this is the year, and I'm really serious, I'm really committed, and then you look at it's 5:30, time to go out for the run, the swim, the bike ride, and then where did that committed person go? So we could say, if you were committed, you would do it. That doesn't help very many people. It's how can I, yes, remember my commitment. That's true. And then work with how my body and the condition of my body and mind at that moment that's getting in the way of my acting on my commitment. Is this addressing what you wanted?
Sorry, just unmuting.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, I still, it's a helpful reframe. And I think I'd have to ponder. I'd actually love to hear if there's any other managers who are struggling with this tension as well. They might be able to help color it in. I think it's another way to look at it is that we have a lot of people who are splitting time across different priorities and different accountability partners. And they're also holding tension. I need to work on X, I need to work on Y. There's only so much time in a day. And so, yeah, it's sort of a challenge to.
Can you help me with this? What's the difference between being accountable and being committed?
I'm not sure.
Sometimes in organizations that are up to good things, people commit themselves to more things than they're able to attend to. And then other people are counting on that, and other people are counting on that person. So 3 layers up, they're all waiting for this one person who's overcommitted themselves. And the shorthand answer is hold them accountable. Hold them accountable. Yes, I'll run over and I'll hold them accountable. I'll grab them by their ears and hold them in the accountability lock. And sometimes something else has to occur, which is when we've asked a person to do something, have we taken into account what they're already doing? I mean, this is going to be forever the trouble with y'all, is you see more need than what you can respond to.
So Jim, this is really helpful. I just want to clarify then, if I'm understanding what you're saying that the role of a manager is a manager. Not that a manager would enter into coaching mode or other modes. You're saying there is no distinction, that a manager is a coach. That is the full role of a manager.
We have to talk more before I would say yes to that, because I don't know. We'd have to have more time to find out exactly what you meant by a manager and talk about more aspects of what it is to be a coach. So, for example, one of the things about being a manager that may be different than being a coach is there are consequences for people getting things done or not. That a manager has to say, sorry, you're not getting your promotion, you're not getting your raise, or you're not getting to work here anymore because of this. And coaches rarely have that. And that's part of what makes it difficult, is there is a kind of danger or threat in the foreground or the background sometimes when our manager is coaching us. And we start to wonder, can we be fully disclosive, or are they going to hold something against us later? So all that makes it difficult to be a full coach for a person. But what I'm saying is we can manage people with a coaching approach, which is what I was trying to lay out for you, which is to interact with people as if they are committed to these things. It's not they're doing it because I want them to do it. It's because they promised to do it. They committed themselves to do it. And then I'm setting up situations where it's easier for them to do it to the extent I can help with the external environment, and then build their capacity to get more skillful in whatever the activities are that will accomplish that, but also in their working with their own body mind that might be getting in the way.
Thank you. That is really helpful. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Thanks, Will. Samara, I wonder if you might be able to.
Yes. Hey, James, thank you for joining us today. My question is around how coaching, can you talk a little bit about how coaching is helping make distinctions versus solving other people's problems? I think a lot of the tendency in Ashoka, as us as change makers, is we see a problem and we want to just offer, this is how you should go about solving that, versus helping make a distinction for them to discover how they should go about solving that problem.
So where did you come up with this knowledge about distinctions?
I'm in the PCC program. Yeah, so it's been very powerful for me.
Oh, well,
that awareness.
That's good to hear. So distinction means pointing something out. You know, like your life partner or your roommate may come in the morning and say, "Where's the coffee?" And you just do that. You don't have a whole long discourse about coffee, and you just do that with your head. That's a distinction. It's just pointing something out. So the point that she's making is that every time we solve a problem, we make a person weaker. Do you see why? Because they're relying on us. That's like someone's working out at the gym and they're having a hard time lifting those weights. Those weights are so heavy. So we're going to help them out. So I understand that it's not as simple as what I just laid out, but it has that consequence that when we solve something for a person, we are declaring they can't do it. We're probably not declaring that. We're not saying that to ourselves. What we're saying to ourselves is, I'm helping them out. I'm saving them time. I've done this a million times. This will make it, I'll show them the direct route. So part of being a coach is being patient and having a longer view, knowing that if the person we're working with builds their capacity, we won't have to keep solving the problem for them. The other unfair metaphor I use for this is like being a parent who wants to make sure their child never falls down, because they might hurt themselves. Yes, they might, but it's only by walking that children learn balance and build their musculature that lets them be independent. Part 3 is it's harder to give a distinction than to solve the problem, because we have to ask the question, how is it that I know what to do and this person doesn't? What is it that I can see? What is it that I can observe that they can't observe? And then how can I make, in the words you're using, how can I make a distinction? How can I show that to them in a way that they can see it? Here's a metaphor that might help Ashoka, because you're working across cultures all the time. We think that we forget sometimes that when we're talking to another person, we're talking to another world. Mm-hmm. We think that yes, some of you know that. Like, no one's ever been over here in my world. I've been pretending. I'm just going along, to not have them feel bad, but they actually have no idea what's going on with me. So it's there's a cultural barrier between us as people. So I've been married to Stace for 42 years this year, and yes, we still like each other. It isn't like, oh, Stacy. Anyway, I could just go on about Stacy, but my point is that even after all these years of being with her, I know that she is a separate person in her own world. And I only know a little bit about that. I'm saying all this so that when we step in to make a distinction, we have to make a distinction that works for them, not that works for us. Sometimes when we think we're solving the problem, the person may, because these are nice people working at Ashoka, are nodding their head, yeah, thanks. And then they walk back and they say, what the hell was that? I had to agree, because it's coming from whoever it's coming from that we always have to go with. But I really didn't get it. So part of that is us having the courage to speak up when we don't get it. When we don't get don't understand the distinction. But from the other side is to take some time to understand the other person's culture, their own world that they're in, and bring language and ways of pointing out that work for them. It's a long-term strategy, making distinctions, pointing out an area to explore or something to think about, rather than giving them an action to do. If people don't know why they're taking the action, they may easily repeating the action in times when it doesn't work. You see, if we become mechanical, the problems that you're in are way more complicated than math problems. Math problems do not have a different solution in India or Nigeria or Brazil or here. But how to talk to someone has a different solution in all those places.
So I want to make space for people in the room too. So I don't know if it was first, second, see, but yeah. And then we'll go back to folks on the room. So yeah, maybe a couple questions in the room first from people here.
Yeah, so
I had a bit time was actually a follow-up question. How do you, so
What's your name?
Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi.
How's it going today?
It's a little warm in here.
It is a little warm in here. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I like this idea of distinction versus helping.
Yeah.
Like actually, sorry. I like the idea of pointing out the distinctions rather than immediately solving the problem. I can see how this applies everywhere from workplace to my home life. It's a constant source of conversation with my husband. But how do you help someone when you're switched roles? Because I've been in both the coaching position,
Yeah.
wanting to solve other people's problems, and then the other side where I'm coaching.
Yeah.
And wanting to say, I don't need you to solve my problem.
Yes.
I would like to understand the distinction.
Yes. So what's your question about that?
Does that work? Even just saying,
Yes,
I
it
don't
does
need you to
work.
solve my problem.
Exactly.
I just want the distinction.
You know, this is a stereotypical male-female thing, at least in the States, which is, you know, the female partner says, I'm having a hard time figuring out how to balance our checking account online. And the male partner says, oh, let me do it. Or just press L3. And that's not what we're saying. We're not saying, solve it for me. It's show me how to think about this. Show me the questions to ask myself. Show me a procedure and how to troubleshoot. That's what I'm asking for. So we can say that. We can say, I'm having difficulty with writing an email to this group that I've never worked with before. And I know you could write the email, but when you come to write an email to a group you've never worked with before, what do you think about? What do you take into consideration? What background research do you do, or who do you talk to prepare yourself? We can do that. We can be proactive about how people interact with us, which will also train them how to interact.
Faith, my question is in a similar vein as well. I know that a general piece of advice out there around when people are experiencing problem or a difficult time is to not draw parallels to your own experience. So someone's going through a problem and it's very easy to say, this just happened to me last month. This is what I did. And I was actually in the situation yesterday, speaking to a friend, undergoing something that I experienced last month. And I knew that sharing my own experience would give us some perspective. But I mean, I'm wondering as a coach, how do you navigate these situations where, like, how much parallel do you draw from your own past?
Yes. So a great question. Thank you. All these are great questions. So if I don't say great question after your question, it doesn't mean it wasn't a great question. It just means I forgot to say that. Fine time, right. Great question. Yeah, really, really, really good question. So a few things. One is the first thing to do is to normalize it, person. So when they're having a difficulty, you say, "Oh yes, I've had this happens. This is totally normal for this to happen. This happens to all of us." So so tell me, when you're in this situation, how do you think about it? How do you react to it? Or what's your response? So find out from them first how they're working with it. And then say, oh, last month when I had something, how I thought about it was this way. How does that map onto yours? Does that show you something? Does it fit? Does it not fit? What do you think?
I mean, I know people are usually quick to say, I mean, as you say, people live in different worlds.
They do.
And they would say, no, you know, you don't know that much about my life.
That's right.
Not the same situation.
That's right. Exactly. It may not be the same situation. Right. So if it's, so I want to be sure I'm getting your question. So your question is how to, when you want to help someone and you have something that you think is similar, but you're not so sure what to do about that. Yeah. So what do you think about my responses to ask those sorts of questions? Like, how is it that when you're in this, you are thinking about it or feeling about it, or what's important for you in this situation? So the point of that is to ask some questions that helps us enter into their world. Because sometimes, especially if we're working with talking to a person from a very different background, they have concerns we don't even know about. Like, so you're saying that what's important for you in this conversation is what your grandmother thinks? Doesn't she live like in Europe? Yes. But who cares? For that person, that's what's important. So we have to find out the lay of the land, the landscape that the person is living in before we can say anything. That's the starting point. And also to keep remembering what you just reminded us of again, which is, yes, they are always going to be in a different world. And even when they're using the same word, they don't mean the same thing. So this becomes really obvious, of course, in other cultures. So when you're talking to a Japanese person who said, I just visited my father, it's not the same thing as an American person who just said, I just visited my father. It was not the same event. Something was really different there. How about that? She's happy now. That was good. I was going to keep going until you were happy.
Valeria.
Valeria. You have referred, how can I ask this? At some point in this conversation, it could lead every one of us to think that in order to practice what you're suggesting, we all have to go through professional coaching training.
That's true.
Yeah.
At my school.
We have scholarships and we partner.
And at the beginning, you referred in your story about Fernando and the work on conversations.
Yeah.
And I before joining Ashoka, I worked with him and
Oh, you did?
Yeah, it was a beautiful experience.
Oh, yeah, he's quite something.
Yeah, and very challenging too. I mean, this idea that you can design conversations that would lead to innovation.
Yes.
And that you can sharpen your abilities to listen differently and all what you have mentioned and more. It's very humbling because it suggests that we can design conversations much better than the way we have it.
Yes.
And the question to you is, how could this group be without all of us becoming professional coaches, you know, how can we sharpen our ability to truly listen to each other and to continue that personal growth that you so beautifully have laid out?
Yeah. So I think the first one is working on being present as the background for listening. The second thing to check out and to work with in our own listening is to check out, and this is at least how Fernando used to say it when I was around him. He would say, listen to your listening. What is it that you're listening to? In any conversation, what are you paying attention to? What registers and what goes by you? And some of us are so full of ourselves enough to say, no, nothing gets by me. Not true. So what am I paying attention to? Then that's a hard one to get, because of course we think we are listening to everything and nothing is outside of our listening. We think even though we're in our own individual world, we think we are in reality. We're not in we forget that we're in a subset of reality called James world or Lucette world, Lucifer world. So a way to practice that is when you're in a common place with someone, ask them, so what did you, if you want to start talking in a weird Fernando way, you could say, so what was your listening during that meeting? Or what did you get from that? Or what did you come away with? Or what opened up for you from there? And see what they were able to pay attention to that you weren't. Then you could take that up. So you may have people who you go to a meeting with, and you say, oh, I think that went really well. They were all nodding their head, doing their Ashoka head nod. And you guys got it down. But someone said, yes, they were nodding their head, but I could feel there was deep distrust at the table. How could they tell that? Then you can talk to them. And they may be more or less able to start to tell you how to detect the mood that's going on. And then you can take it up as your practice to start to pay attention to mood. Some of us talk to groups and we're not noticing the group. You ever know? Yes. Some of us get so afraid in talking to groups, we just find a friendly face, like, this is a friendly face, I'll just talk to her the whole time. And then there's 20 other people that you don't include. So that's a place to start. You can, here's some other things you can listen for. Mood is a great one to listen for. I think it's always good to listen for what are people's commitments. It's rare that people will just say, here's my commitments. But you can listen for them. You can start to listen for what's this person's, what future do they have in mind for themselves? What future are they opening? They're doing their best to open up. Another one is, what is their immediate concerns? Immediate concerns are what's present. Oh, I have to give you this mnemonic about immediate concerns. It's from an ancient movie. It's from the 1980s, so some of you weren't born, but you can look up this movie. It's called Alien. Have any of you seen the original Alien? I know there's been Alien versus the Cookie Monster, Alien versus George Bush. There's been lots of Alien movies, but the first one, these astronauts are walking on this mysterious planet, and one of them bends over a pod. Remember this? And something comes up and attaches to his face. That's an immediate concern. And there's people walking around here with aliens in their face. How are you? I'm fine. How are you? Oh, yes. Nice day, isn't it? Oh, it's Friday. What are you doing on the weekend? And we don't pay attention to the alien on their face, or we don't even pay attention to the alien on our face. But it's going to distort what we say, what we're hearing. And the background for all this is however smart we are, however present we are, our listening is always going to be incomplete. There's always going to be something not included. So coming into a conversation like that. Last thing I'll say is it's worthwhile to check the sensations in your body after a conversation, because sometimes there's wisdom in your body that you didn't cognize. Like, it just felt weird. What was weird about that? They said all the right things. But then you can sense into your body and discover something, learn something. So this is an endlessly deep topic, but that's a start.
We have maybe 1 minute talking about types of conversations.
Sure. So this conversation is about the weather. This conversation is about dessert. I'm just giving her a hard time. So there's 3 kinds of conversations that have to do with getting things working together. The first is the outer circle. This is a way to think about it. The container, the context for all of them is a conversation that builds relationship. So I would say 2 things that are first being opposed. First off is we are always related to people. We always have a relationship. We are beings, they're beings. There's a deep connection all the time. And then a conversation for relationship mostly has to do with what we're listening for. So in a conversation that we're entering into with the intention of building a relationship, strengthening the relationship, we're listening for what do we have, what's our mutuality. So what mutual concerns do we have? What mutual commitments do we have? What mutual, what future do we have in mind that's common? This is totally normal. When you're first talking to someone, you know, we ask them a bunch of questions to find out, oh, they like to go hiking. I like to go hiking. Oh, they like, their favorite art is Rembrandt. Do you know there's great Rembrandts in DC?
Yeah.
There are great Rembrandts in Washington, DC. You have to tell me. Anyway, Rembrandt, we all go today. Anyway, listening for what we have in common. And based upon what we discover, we can have a different depth of relationship. So if we have common interests, we could be a friend. And if we have common concerns, we might be a colleague. And if we have common commitments, we can have a partner, the life business partner, and we have commitments. So that's the first thing that has to be in place. And then there's conversations within that circle of relationship as the outer ring. The next ring in is conversations that explore possibilities. Conversations that explore possibilities have to do with the relationships. So this is, again, a common sense thing. We don't explore possibilities with somebody who doesn't care about that. So I don't go out to Luzette and say, Luzette, you know, I'm going fly fishing in Idaho next week, and I'm tying the fly that is there on the water this time of year. So I'm wondering if you have any advice for me. Should I use this shit again? Anyway. And she's a nice person, but even her face is glazing over. If we try to have a conversation, a possibility with somebody with whom we don't share that interest or concern, it doesn't go anywhere. So I'm guessing all of us on the call and in person know that when we include others in the conversations for possibility, it's much more likely that they're going to be committed. Even if we don't do exactly what they preferred, if they're included in the possibility discussion, it's more likely that they will be involved and put themselves fully into it. And this is, of course, the way that, as you said, we're tapping into the group intelligence. So the possibilities come from one person, however brilliant they are. They have a partial view. And given that currently acting to be smart people, that's the good side and the bad side, isn't it? The good side, but then you want to do something and they have really good ideas of how it could be different, or maybe we shouldn't even do that. Anyway. Yes, conversations for possibility. So conversations for possibility end in one of three ways. Either we move it to action, or we promote possibilities, or say, that didn't go anywhere. If we have to go somewhere, it isn't a conversation for possibility. It's dealing with a crisis or an emergency. So when the building's on fire, you don't say, let's have a conversation for possibility. What do you think a good way of evacuating this building would be? What do you think? Not the moment. So just rearranging their submarine as you talk. Then there's conversation for action. Within that has the most structure. This essentially is who's going to do what, when. In all kinds of components like time.
Yeah, Miguel.
How can you tell?
Because it blinks.
Oh, it blinks. Oh, that's good. Anyway, conversations for action are include lots of elements like time, includes a future action, it includes conditions of satisfaction, all of that. One of the real pieces of confusion that happens in the world of getting things done is some people just want to have conversations for action. Can I just tell people what to do? Yes. I mean, what's the point of being the boss? That is not going to work. Turns out people are not automatons. And just because I know it may not happen so much here, but there are lots of places in the world where people imagine that because they're in a place of positional authority, they don't have to have a conversation for possibility or relationship. They can just give orders. But the trouble with that is the person may start acting on the order, but as soon as they hit an obstacle, they'll come back and tell you, oh, no, I really wanted to get that report done for you, but I went to print it out and there was no paper in the printer. What could I do? The smallest thing will stop them because they're not committed. They're obligated. Or they're just going along, or they couldn't find a way of saying no to us. So a conversation that explores people's real commitment based upon having explored possibilities and having as its bedrock in its context relationship is the most pragmatic way to go about this. It takes a bit more time, but it's pragmatic in that the outcomes will be more reliably produced. Plus, the mood will be good. I hope none of you have ever worked at places where people just feel like what happens every day at work is more rocks get put on their shoulders. And then after a while, everyone doesn't.
Thank you. I am conscious of the time. We have 5 more minutes, as we have suggested. So I wonder if it would be just a good way for us to have like an exercise. Maybe we've been talking, or maybe just a moment of presence that you can lead us into. And then obviously if you have more time and people can stay, we can have more questions. But I think that at least to close the space, it would be good to have just a moment of presence together, presence here in DC and all around the world with our Ashoka community and universe.
So let's do this in a different way than maybe you've done it before. So let's do this by using our right hand. And I checked all of you have right hands. And put it on the middle of your chest and close your eyes for a moment. and remember and feel who or what you most love. Just let your whole heart and body, mind, and awareness be filled with that love you have for them. And notice what happens for you when you turn towards that love. Just for a moment, imagine that you're breathing in and out of your heart. That brings even more awareness to this part of us. And for the last part of this, let's see if you can release the love that you might be feeling in the middle of your chest. And let it be as big as it is. Just let it flow out from you and let it be as big as it is. Please. It's so big that all you're doing is walking around in it and breathing it. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
So as official timekeeper, I want to share, so thank you to everyone who's joined online. It's been, I'm sorry we didn't get to all of everyone's questions, but I've captured them. So maybe we can find a way to answer some more. But please feel free to hop off, don't be rude. And folks in the room, thank you all for being here present. I didn't get a chance to look at anyone, call anyone, so thanks for making sure everyone was involved. James, thank you so much for coming. It's such an honor, and I think we're all really lucky to spend this time. So maybe if there's a couple extra minutes, but I don't want to commit anyone to that. So,
yeah, I have time.
Okay, so we'll try not to spill to 5 o'clock on Friday, but we'll keep a couple questions open.
But I want to say, while we're still here in a group, is this is a gigantic honor for me. I am so happy to have met Ashoka and to meet you, not just Ashoka, but you in this room and you on this call, and to meet people who are up to what you're up to in the world. Given of all the other things you could be doing with your life, this is what you're doing. Oh boy, how wonderful that there are such people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great. So
go get them.
Questions?
So we have a couple that have been sitting for a while. I don't know if folks are, I'll actually I'll just say some names
and see if they are here.
and see if they're still here. But Moriel, oh my gosh, there's so many things online, so we'll have to make sure.
He's here. Can you guys hear me?
Oh yeah, Moriel, you had a question a while ago. Please go ahead.
Oh, hi. Okay, so I have a quick question about judgment and presence. I was wondering if you had any recommendations for how to get yourself out of the way when coaching somebody, because we come with our own set of preconceived notions and biases, and you're not going to get a clear read from what you're receiving unless you can get yourself out of the way.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a long-term strategy about that, which is to do things like make a list of the prejudices or the my judgments that I have of people already. I know I immediately have this about folks, and start to list those, and then start awareness practice. Say stopping once per day and noticing, how many times did I judge people this way or that way? So that we start to notice the occurrence of it, then we can stop ourselves in the moment of starting to make the judgment. But we have to be looking for it in particular first.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah, and the other is all this we're talking about being present. A lot of that has to do with interoception. Interoception means sensing our body, and you might be able to tell. We're able to tell. Our body feels different when we're making a judgment. It feels different. There's a kind of tightness and contraction.
Wow. Okay.
That you can notice. And then you can sigh, breathe into it, relax a little bit. How's that?
That sounds good. I actually start my New Ventures West journey next week, so I'm very, very
You
excited.
are?
Yes.
All right.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your question.
Thank you.
I inserted myself into the queue. If I could ask a
Yeah,
question.
please, speak up and slowly.
Okay, thanks. So I'm Doug. The comment you made about entering other worlds and everyone existing in other worlds, or their own world, really resonates with me. And I wonder, what is the limit of empathy then? Because I can try as hard as I want to enter someone's world, but there will always be a gap in my understanding, as well as people's belief that I understand them. So similar to what Faith here talked about, sharing a story, people will always be a little skeptical no matter how exact your experience is because you're different people. I'm wondering, is that important to recognize? And if it is, how do you grapple with that?
So you're calling this one question, Doug?
Yeah, I know it's deep. So maybe my question is, what is the limit of empathy in this case?
At any given moment, it's limited, but it's not limited theoretically. You can always become more and 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 more empathetic. So at a given moment, it's limited by my state.
Yeah.
So if I'm already annoyed and someone comes in with a problem, if they're bleeding, maybe you'll get some empathy. So that's one.
Okay.
The other thing, there's difference. There's just something that you were making a synonym, which isn't a synonym, which is empathy and understanding. They're not the same. So I may never understand what's happening, but I have total empathy for it. This person is in such pain. I don't even get why. They told me, and I didn't understand it. So I can feel it, and I can hold it here without understanding it. Because otherwise, what happens is the person has to diminish what they're saying, diminish what they're feeling, and put it in a form that we can understand it to help us. Or we start to act as if we do understand, and we mess it up. So my view is that it's possible to have deep, 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 deep empathy and have limited understanding. Like if you're a parent, and so I'm a parent, and our daughter's growing up. So when our sweetie pie was 14 and came back from school and said she was having, problem with Emily, and I didn't understand why, but I could feel it. And I didn't insist that she make it intelligible to me for it to be valid. That's part of the bullshit about I have to understand. It's only valid if I understand it. Mostly we're not going to understand it. So mothers and babies, men won't ever get this. So even our daughter is now this, grown up, professor and teaching in the university and all this stuff. And Stacy and she have a relationship that I won't ever get. It's all right. I can feel it without understanding it. Here's a sidebar. The people that I think have the best empathy in the world, there are some saints that have great empathy, but mostly they're novelists. Great novelists have the greatest empathy. Are you a reader of novels?
I tend to for nonfiction, honestly.
Yeah, I know, that's how everyone is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So nonfiction is terrific, but you don't find out so much about people.
Yeah.
So are you, so read Middlemarch. Okay. Yeah, he says okay now. It's a fantastic book written by George Eliot, a woman. And she has this astounding ability to enter the world of other people and write from their inner world and write dialogue as if she was that person. And there's like 30 major characters in this book. How does she do that? It's possible for us. So that's what happens when we read great novelists, is we discover that it's possible to do it.
Are there any other questions?
Facilitator hat, I think maybe someone in the room here, because I go back and forth until
okay, but we don't have a line?
We do have a couple questions.
Yeah, please.
Okay,
please.
so I know that
please.
Jess Aguero had a question, but I know she had to step away. So
Just ask the question.
Is Ross here?
Ross? Oh, he just left.
No, I think he left.
Okay, and is Stay still here?
No.
No? Okay.
Just ask the questions and then.
So Jess's question is quite big. I think it will be here for weeks, which is a good question. So what relationship does your practice have with dismantling systemic oppression?
Yeah, so oppression is everywhere. It's out in the outer world and it's in the inner world. We're full-time employed in suppressing ourselves, repressing ourselves, and then we share it with others. So the more we attend to ourselves and the more we let ourselves feel and respond, the more we'll notice how much suppression is going on in the world. Not just as an idea, but we'll feel it. But it will also give us a chance to blend in some compassion and some empathy and not just rage. So, rage is good for a while, but rage burns us out, can lead to all kinds of unskillful actions. So that's one dimension of it. The other dimension of it is that in order to attend to the things that y'all are attending to on a long-term basis, I have to do my inner work. I have to catch myself in my mental conclusions. I have to interrupt my stories that I'm starting to tell. I have to discover my range of mood and what that makes possible or not. And that's all inner work. Part 3 is we discover that inner work and outer work is the same work. There's just work.
Could you say more about that?
Sure, I could. What would you like me to say about it?
I mean, the idea, and this is inner work has in itself, it's sort of like more, at least from my perspective, it sounds like there are more known pathways for inner work. There are more offerings, to put it in those terms, from the spiritual to the coaching to everything in between, or your own intuition and practicing the art of living. But outer work, bringing the two together, us as individual persons having that illusion that we're an individual person, that us in how do we actually weave in the inner work with being in relation with others, and particularly in the context of work and being an entrepreneur? It's a kind of question that I think it's always present in our work because of the kind of work that we do. And we don't do it very well, most of us. It's a bit like stumbling, like you're a toddler, you know, and you may be doing the initial stages of the inner work, but you try to rush when it comes to the outer work. And obviously I'm speaking for myself, but that's what I face.
Thank you. Where's the what do you stumble on?
It's in part what you were referring to before, that for example, the culture of this organization, what this organization values, is the ability to be a change maker, the ability to enable many to be change makers, so there is a bias to action. And historically, we have assumed that entrepreneurs are made, not constantly, that there are skills that you have to constantly master, and that is not just cognitive, but it's actually an inner work journey that allows you to be an entrepreneur, a better entrepreneur. And it's sort of like we tend to think in terms of destinations as opposed to journeys. We tend to think about, you know, this is the idea, this is the object, as opposed to we're all in a journey, both within ourselves and in relation to others, and how are we mindful of that and master not master, but let's say practice more mindfully the skills of going about that.
Right. So this this level of awakeness that you're wanting in the group is rare, as you're saying. There's not many examples in the world of groups like that who are awake to that extent, because we come to Ashoka or any similar organization with a huge background of achievement and being rewarded for reaching goals and doing it on my own, even, all of that. So now we're in a different situation. So it takes, and this is how I think inner and outer work reinforce each other. It takes my having a deeper developmental stage. And I think that there, just like there's cognitive development stages that we go through, that we can solve problems at 7 years old that we can at 2 years old in this physical development. We go through this beyond the maturation of the physical body. There's developmental steps that we can take. So when I said, so this, sorry, I'll just keep one line going through here. So inner and outer. So when I start to notice that I am annoyed that other people are being too focused on getting things done and not enough on developing people about the process, that shows me a place to work on myself. Because as long as I'm annoyed about it, I'm not going to be helpful in helping other people beyond it. They're going to have to deal with my annoyance. And that's as far as it's going to go. You're going to be annoyed, and they're going to be hurt or embarrassed or defensive that you're annoyed, and then we'll just stay there until you die. It's basically how the world goes. You just get annoyed that other people aren't seeing it, and they get, anyway, I don't need to tell you anything about that. So that's a big red X, work here. I'm annoyed. What's going on with me? Can I free my annoyance so that I can enter into the other person's world as valid, not as a misunderstanding of what is true? Not too many people will welcome us in when our stance is, you have it wrong, thank God you met me. This is part of the trouble with meeting tonight, at least in those days. That's what the stance was. But I know lots of people who have that stance. It doesn't help. So that's why we have to keep finding what's hooking us, what's stopping us, what's triggering us. And instead of trying to make the world be different so I'm not get triggered anymore, I work with my triggering, and then I come back to the world and I can be much more skillful. Like that. So you're working at a place, you might think you're working at Ashoka, but you're in some sort of weird monastery where we are always finding, every day we get a new assignment of what to work on. What to work on. Those people are so stupid. I know you don't say those sorts of things out loud. I don't actually know how you talk to your admin here. But that means work here. When my nervous system is triggered, the place to work is within me, not to try and change the world so I'm not triggered anymore. This is the key to being a parent. Instead of trying to get the kid to stop doing things that annoy me, work on here so I'm not annoyed by it.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? Briefly, you're saying inner, outer, and I'm wondering, are those simultaneous, or do you come to inner and then revisit the outer? So I'm thinking of
I don't know, how do you do it? It doesn't matter what I think. How does it go for you?
Well, I think in broader arcs, I'm usually focusing on one or the other. I don't usually have energy to try to do both. Thinking about some of the core structural issues here, if I'm looking at one, I might be frustrated and set that energy on the outer, and then realize at some moment it triggers a realization. I'm like, okay, let me revisit this. But that also takes a lot of energy.
So you're claiming that there's times when you're not in the inner, you're in the outer?
Yeah.
No, that never happened. You never were in the outer.
But my focus could be on one or more, right? Like if I'm not paying attention to it, does that change the? So
I'm doing my best to mess up your question, because the way your question is going to goes is going to reinforce the way you're already doing it.
Great. I see.
So that your question is not going to help you.
Yeah. Okay.
So interact with everything as if it's happening within your world. If you're aware of it, it's in your world. Whether it's, quote, the outer or, quote, the inner. So here's a way you can work with that, Doug, if you want, is you can notice that your experience of this room and the experience of the emotion that you're having, you're experiencing that in the same place. We don't have a separate body for the outer world, and then I'm gonna go do my inner work and step into my other body. It's the same one. What did you make of that?
So academically, it makes sense. I think that I would love to exist in that state. Thinking about myself, I often lose track of myself. I always try and put other things first. That self-awareness is very difficult. So I see a distinction, but understanding that it's artificial, like it's not.
Yeah. So one of the ways you take care of yourself is by forgetting yourself, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's part of what that vulnerability. I don't usually let myself feel that, especially in places where there's pain.
Yeah.
So I separate.
Yeah.
Thanks for allowing me to facilitate or follow up. That's never best practice.
One thing I said to a different group this week that I wanted that I could say to you guys is there's essentially two ways of thinking about how people are motivated. One of the ways people consider themselves motivated is they have drives. And we talked about that. What's driving a person? And you may have even taken personality tests to figure out what your drivers are. As far as I know, this came in the West, at least from Nietzsche and from Freud. Drives, you have these drives. The other way is what is welcoming you? What's inviting you into the world? What's drawing you into the world? What's drawing you in rather than drives? I recommend in doing your work that you let the world draw you rather than rely on drives. Drives are about mostly me making up for something I feel bad about. Like, I'm this privileged white male sitting in Washington, D.C., and all the world is suffering. I better do something about that. Guilt. I'm working on my guilt. I'm actually not working on the world. And we know that because we get so personally invested in how it goes. Because it isn't about them, it's about me. I'm working on my own drives. I'm not working on what's drawing me into the world, which gives us a chance to be more objective. Oh, that didn't work. Okay. I had my whole self-worth and my whole, the only way I'm keeping the demons of shame and embarrassment and guilt and the onerous burden of privilege at bay is by doing this good work. And if this good work doesn't turn out, oh, the demons are getting me. That's how it goes. We call this getting burned out.
So, like, I'm reading at something in between the lines, just really briefly, what's been said throughout the session. How does one really let go? I mean, if my ability to interface with the world is limited by the number of triggers I have, how do I actually process that? Because I work a lot in very troubled countries, and it's really hard to explain empathy when someone's trying to dodge a bomb or a bullet. It's incredibly difficult to get them anywhere near this kind of conversation. So how does one help, and how does one actually process to let go properly, to truly let go, not to like pause or postpone, to let go?
So you're talking about you, or you're talking about these people who are being bombed?
Yeah, it's one and the same. I am that person that's getting bombed, and I'm also the person that's trying to support that person.
Yeah, so it's true that you are, and it's true that you're not, too, because you're not physically being bombed at this moment. So you're not having all the stuff happening in your body that would be happening to a person who's being bombed. So that's right. So that when someone's being bombed or in risk of their life or their family or their way of life is threatened, yes, empathy, it can't be present enough for empathy. So our task then is to find what is the version of that that is possible for this person. So they start in that direction. Because the point of empathy is it will make the suffering of their situation less.
And in less extreme examples, like how can you actually really get past something so that you don't see it in your team? Like I work with different teams and I see this the same pattern keeps coming back. Even though everyone is doing the inner work, it would be naive to say that they're not. But it's still there. So the elephant still in the room is just a smaller elephant.
So so you're asking me this question now, how you work with a team so that they don't have those issues anymore? I didn't get the question.
Sorry, okay. So let's say that I have a recurring pattern that I'm trying to get rid of, so I can listen really carefully and really be there.
Yes.
How do I actually process? I mean, what are the techniques that you have to actually process that? And how can I share that with the people I work with so that they can also process too?
Yes. So you have to do part one before you do part two. And part of your deal is you're trying to do one and two at the same time. Yeah, right. So, like letting go means you have to work in at least 4 different parts of your life. So the inner world we've been talking about. So how your mind works. So you're onto how your mind works, right? So this fierceness of your mind, and you're using your mind to wrestle the world down, and all that. The trying to build a story around your feeling that all that you have. So letting go means working there. Physical patterns, so mental patterns are held physically. So we have to work with our physicality in lots of different ways to let go. You also have to do mental hygiene, so that the 10 things that you're thinking 1,000 times per day has to shift. Then you have to work with your nervous system. And that's what, I'm not going to be able to design a whole life thing for you, but these are the general categories. Nervous system. There's I think I even have it. I have it here. A book. Somewhere. Oh, yeah, here it is. Polyvagal theory in therapy. Bestseller, like it's born supremacy. This author says, let's see if I can find this paragraph. I read this to every group in the world that I talk to. So here's how it goes, is that our brain puts a story on what's going on in our body. We live a story that originates in our anatomic state, is sent through anatomic pathways from the body to the brain, and is then translated by the brain into the beliefs that guide our daily living. The mind narrates what the nervous system knows. Story follows state. So for a while, you're going to have to work on your state instead of the story, because you're trying to get it to feel different here by doing stuff out here. It's not going to work.
So in the team context, would telling a different story collectively help with that? Or is that the second step?
It is the second step.
All right. All right, thanks for that. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, facilitator, how are you on time?
I have to be done at noon. That was my understanding.
Great. I
So
think we have 2
we're done.
minutes left.
I mean, anything like some comments from people online?
Well, I sent the title
Big important.
privately. I'm going to send it to everyone. Oh, Samara just pasted it. Thank you. I have 1 or 2 questions, but I think
big and important.
they're very easy to clear up, sure. So I guess here.
But there's others that
I'm really interested in those people here. What did you this came in and started talking to you? Where did this lead you? Or what's happening for you as a this interaction?
And feel free to speak up if you're online.
You reconnected me to my heart.
That's good. Yeah.
I feel thankful for allowing myself to be here and reflect. I feel that thankful.
Part of what I feel is also connected to Doug's question, which is merging the inner and the outer in more obvious ways. And I find that when we look at a quality that's symbolic, something like ease, we can sense that in ourselves, but we can also sense it in others. Something like joy, we can sense it in ourselves, we can also sense it in others. So I feel like that responsibility to embody and also evoke the qualities that are so obviously shared and sensed in a stronger, more visceral, also kind of a back to the basics way. This is a reminder of our responsibility to that, and that getting back to that foundational place where these are really qualities that we're all sharing and breathing and living simultaneously. How do we bring those more to the surface and to the forefront in such a genuine, loving, caring way? And I both feel I have experienced that here, and that this is a reminder for us all to bring that with such heart and with such care in any circumstance.
I have like synesthesia for love. So
Let me just say one sentence about this gorgeous statement. And love people even when they're not that way. Not come back when you're in the ease, please. We don't want any of that pollutant non-ease here. Can we be easy when people are not at ease themselves? Just the other side of what you're saying, because it was so beautiful and inspiring, but sometimes we forget the other part.
And these are trusting qualities. So if I feel it, that's why I said responsibility, because to see it and trust it, even in places where it is not strong or obvious or there in that moment. So I think we are also the mirrors for that, whether it's in front of us or not, and that is part of the nonverbal communication and conversation that happens.
Frankly, I feel a lot of gratitude to you and to the organizers because you brought me back to the basics. You helped me realize that I was looking for a formula embedded in coaching, and as opposed, and you brought me back to the basics of first love, inner work, and mindfully living, and has been a privilege to be here.
Good. Thank you very much. All right, I think we're officially done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
A ver, ay, no. A ver, ¿cómo? Ya no entiendo.